Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, June 4th. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, Asa Winstanley, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 972 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, we'll be joined by Ahmed Al-Najjar, a Palestinian journalist and academic based in Khan Yunis, to talk about Israel's attacks, its expanding control of territory in Gaza, the role of collaborator gangs, and how people in Gaza are trying to cope and what they are hoping the future will bring. Later on in the program, Jon will cover week 13 of the battle in South Lebanon, where Hezbollah's armed FPV drones have exacted a deadly toll on Israeli troop movements. But first, let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine and Lebanon. In Gaza, overnight and into this morning on Thursday, at least 9 people were killed and dozens were injured in a series of Israeli attacks from helicopter gunships that simultaneously targeted 4 residential apartments inside the city, according to reporter Saad Hezbollah, who filmed this footage outside of Al-Shifa Hospital. Local reporters stated that the attack killed 5 members of the Labad family while they were sleeping in their apartment, 2 parents and 3 of their children, Manar, Hassan, Mohammed, Rahaf, and Tamim Labad. One 9-year-old girl, Hala, is now the sole survivor of her family. Saad Hezbollah showed this photograph of some of the many children who were among the injured. The airstrikes hit homes in the beach refugee camp, Karama, Tel Al-Hawa, and Sheikh Radwan neighborhoods of Gaza City. Local reporters say that the targeted buildings were sheltering displaced families, with rescue crews continuing to search the rubble for survivors as intense flames engulfed the buildings. On Wednesday, Israel drone-bombed the courtyard of a home in the Maghazi refugee camp in central Gaza, killing 2 Palestinian siblings and wounding 4 others, according to local reports. The Quds news agency posted videos of the bodies of Sakr and Momen Abu Karim being transferred to the morgue by Palestinian emergency response teams. On Tuesday, Israel carried out a series of attacks in north, central, and southern Gaza. An Israeli drone strike on a tent sheltering forcibly displaced families in the beach refugee camp west of Gaza City injured at least 10 Palestinians, according to the Wafa news agency. Reporter Salah Ziada captured footage of injured people being driven to the hospital in civilian cars. The attack came as Israeli artillery shelled areas north of Al-Burej refugee camp in central Gaza, while Israeli forces continued large-scale blasting operations east of Khan Yunis in the south, Wafa added. Also on Tuesday, an Israeli drone strike killed a Palestinian man and injured at least 10 others in a tent shelter in the Mawasi area of Khan Yunis, according to sources at Nasser Medical Complex. And in Deir Balah, a Palestinian man was killed and 4 others were injured in an Israeli attack on a car. Sources at Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital reported to Wafa news agency that 32-year-old Ahmed Khalid Abu Magaseb was killed when the vehicle was struck on the busy Salahuddin Street in the eastern part of the city. The hospital sources added that 4 people were injured, including some in serious condition, and were admitted to emergency departments amid continued pressure on medical teams and shortages of resources. Reporter Bilal Samak captured video of the elderly father of Ahmed Abu Magaseb collapsing in grief at the hospital, being comforted by loved ones around him.
والله عافية والله عافية صاحبي والله يا ابوي والله عارف والله عارف والله عارف ماشي ماشي بس
On Monday, June 1st, a child was injured in an Israeli drone strike on the Burej refugee camp in central Gaza as Israeli naval vessels fired several shells toward the Gaza City shoreline. However, no injuries were reported, according to the Wafa news agency. Israel bombed the Gaza seaport on Sunday, where at least 2 Palestinians were killed and 25 others were wounded, including children. A witness to the massacre, Mohammed Salman, told Al Arabiya TV correspondent and regular guest of the Electronic Intifada, Asim An-Nabih, that Israeli helicopter gunships fired missiles at the port while families were trying to relax and gather together. There are also displaced families living at the port. He told Asim that, quote, nobody comes here unless they're bored out of their minds. There were children, women, cars, people. I don't know how long these attacks will last. When will they leave us alone? This is a safe area where people can roam freely. Why bomb it? Where are the human rights they keep talking about? We don't see human rights or humanity at all. This is no safe area. This was a safe area until they bombed us there. A woman standing beside a shelter at the port where people were killed and wounded, blood still spattered on the walls, admonished the so-called international community, saying, quote, we don't want any country boasting, saying we are helping Gaza. We don't want food. We don't want anything from you. We want the genocide to stop. Either you murder us all at once or you let us be, she adds. Every day we say goodbye. Every day we lose someone. This is just not fair. Where are the international organizations? Where are the international treaties? Where are they? None of it reaches us. Everything is permitted in Gaza. Whatever Israel says is accepted. The Israelis fired missiles, reconnaissance rockets. This is a humanitarian zone. Where is the humanity? Where is it? We are living in this camp. These are tents. We live here. What is our fault in this? This footage was recorded by journalist Salah Ziada.
اي دولة تتباهى وتقول احنا بنعطي غزة، احنا لا بدنا اكل ولا بدنا اي شيء منكم، احنا بدنا الحرب توقف، اما بتموتونا مرة واحدة، اما كل حال، اما كل يوم بنودع بعض، يعني هذا مش عدل. وين المنظمات الدولية؟ وين المعاهدات الدولية؟ وينها؟ ما فيش عنا، كله اصبح مباح بغزة، كله اصبح مباح. 3 جايين يشموا هواء، قالت اليهود خبطتهم بصاروخ استطلاع. هذا مش عدل. وين المعاهدات الدولية؟ هذا مش عدل. هذه تعد منطقة إنسانية. اليهود حكت منطقة إنسانية. وين الإنسانية؟ وينها؟ إحنا مقيمين في هذا المخيم، هي الخيم يعني نتفرج وإحنا هان. إيش ذنبنا؟ إيش ذنبنا؟
On May 30th, Israel assassinated Dr. Jamal Abu Aoun, the head of the anesthesia department at Al-Yafa Medical Hospital in Deir al-Balah in central Gaza. He was killed in an Israeli airstrike near the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in the city. Reporter Bilal Samak recorded footage of the funeral for Dr. Abu Aoun, with his friends, family, and colleagues mourning over his body. The Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza stated that as of Thursday, at least 947 Palestinians have been killed and more than 2,900 have been injured since the so-called ceasefire was declared last October. The ministry said that 119 Palestinians were killed during the month of May alone, the highest number of people killed every month since the beginning of 2026. 16% of those killed were children. In related news, Salim Owais, the communications specialist for the United Nations Children's Agency, UNICEF, said this week at a press briefing in Geneva that the failure to meet children's basic needs in Gaza is trapping them in an endless cycle of suffering. Because of the continued refusal by Western powers to stop the genocide, including Israel's ongoing blockade on Gaza, families are increasingly unable to provide their children with clean water, healthy food, and medical care. Owais said that, quote, families across Gaza do not have enough clean water. They are forced to choose between drinking, washing, and cooking with what little they have. Items needed to sustain water systems and repair damaged water infrastructure, including lubricant oil, water treatment chemicals, and spare parts, are not being allowed in at the scale needed. meaning we cannot repair systems as quickly as needed to reach more children with clean water, and existing systems risk failure due to lack of maintenance and overuse. If we cannot repair systems, then we have to rely solely on water trucking, which is much more expensive and doesn't reach populations as effectively. Owais added that the clearing of solid waste and rubble at the necessary scale is currently impossible because there is no accessible space left to clear it to, directly causing rampant skin, respiratory, and gastrointestinal infections and diseases in children. Quote, no parent should be in a position where they cannot provide their children with the basic needs to keep them healthy, he said. No parent should have to watch as their child writhes in pain from lesions or buckle from weakness because of entirely preventable diarrhea. That this is happening should be, to everyone, entirely unconscionable. Dr. Munir al-Bush, the Director General of the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza, warned this week that more than 1 million children in Gaza are surviving on roughly 6 liters of water per day, as water becomes more and more scarce and as Israel continues to prevent the entry of water desalination plants, filters, or materials for repair. Speaking to Al Jazeera Arabic on Tuesday, Dr. Al-Burj said that medical staff are fearing outbreaks of disease epidemics because of the lack of clean water and Israel's deliberate incapacitation of the health infrastructure. Quote, we are talking about no health recovery in every sense of the word. We are talking about not even rebuilding, reconstruction, as they say. No medicine available, no safe homes, no capacity for treatment, he said. In a related post on social media, Dr. Al-Burj said that, quote, Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, which serves a population of over 500,000 people, has suspended surgical operations due to the failure of its 4th backup generator. If this situation persists at its current pace, other critical services, such as intensive care and neonatal units, will also cease functioning. We are facing a crisis deliberately manufactured by the occupation, which is blocking the entry of lubricants required for these generators, as well as spare parts and new power generators. He added that, quote, there is a severe shortage of medicines and medical supplies. Stocks of many essential items have hit zero, and the reality is that this portends a grave and imminent danger. The occupation blocks the entry of medicines, medical supplies, lubricants, and filters, while simultaneously allowing in sweets, chocolates, and other non-essential items. We are currently battling rodent infestations inside our tents, as these pests have begun to compete with us for our meager sustenance, devouring the flour intended to feed our children, by allowing diseases to spread and waste to accumulate, coupled with the complete absence of sanitation services and severe water shortages. The occupation is deliberately facilitating the spread of disease throughout Gaza, he warned. We'll have much more on the humanitarian and health situation in Gaza coming up later in the show with Ahmed Al-Najjar in Khan Yunis. The civil defense in Gaza stated this week that because of ongoing Israeli aggression and attacks targeting and setting fire to homes, displacement tents, and civilian vehicles, or because of accidents inside displacement shelters where families are forced to burn wood and plastic to prepare meals due to a lack of cooking gas, the fire and rescue services operating with limited resources are facing an unsustainable and dangerous burden. 3 firefighting and rescue vehicles and 2 ambulances, the civil defense said, are out of service due to a critical shortage of spare parts and fire extinguishing supplies. Furthermore, a substantial portion of their already severely limited fuel reserves has been depleted. Speaking to the Gaza Herald, Ahmed Radwan, director of media for the civil defense, said the institution is approaching a critical breaking point. According to Radwan, nearly 90% of civil defense vehicles operating across Gaza have either been destroyed or rendered inoperable during the war. He added that since the implementation of the ceasefire agreement in October 2025, no new ambulances, rescue vehicles, or emergency equipment have been allowed into the Gaza Strip. In a press statement, the civil defense said, quote, "We issue a grave warning that humanitarian intervention operations regarding fire incidents and rescue missions are at risk of coming to a complete halt. Currently, operations are restricted solely to the most critical emergencies due to these recurring crises. The unavailability of spare parts for civil defense vehicles, coupled with the failure to permit the entry of firefighting equipment, rescue gear, and fuel, foreshadows a complete cessation of humanitarian interventions in the coming days. This looming crisis unfolds against the backdrop of escalating Israeli aggression on one hand and the onset of summer and rising temperatures on the other." The civil defense called on international organizations to take concrete actions, including prioritizing the provision of essential safety and fire prevention supplies. Turning to the occupied West Bank, Israeli soldiers abducted and arrested 35 Palestinians during a series of raids overnight on Tuesday, including 4 young Palestinian women students of 𝐓𝐿𝐴 University near Ramallah. The arrests were concentrated in Tulkarem and Nablus, with additional raids reported in Ramallah, Al-Khalil, and occupied Jerusalem. The detainees also included several formerly imprisoned Palestinians. The 4 students, Jolan Abu Awad, Natalie Abudaya, Leila Khalil, and Sama Safi, were abducted from their student housing on campus. The Palestinian Prisoners Society said that their arrests brought the number of Palestinian women currently held in Israeli detention to 89. In a statement, the bishop of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land, Dr. Imad Haddad, denounced Israel's arrest of Natalie Abudaya, who is from the church community, and called for her immediate release. The bishop said that, quote, "We are deeply horrified and shocked by this news, as well as by the news that her family does not yet know where she has been taken. Natalie is a member of Evangelical Lutheran Church of the Reformation in Beit Jala, a graduate of Talitha Kumi Lutheran School, and a media and journalism student at 𝐓𝐿𝐴 University. We are incredibly disturbed by the reality that Natalie now joins the thousands of Palestinians in Israeli detention without charge or trial. Palestinian civilians, including women and children, suffer deep injustice in Israeli military detention and are often held for months or years with no explanation. In the north, on May 31st, Israeli forces extended a military order that closes off 3 refugee camps in Jenin and Tulkarem, according to documentation from UNRWA, the United Nations Agency for Palestine Refugees. More than 33,000 Palestinians from these camps have been displaced and have not been allowed to return since January 2025, UNRWA said, and this latest extension prolongs their displacement by another 2 months until the end of July. The Wafa news agency reported that Israeli settlers, backed by Israeli soldiers, set fire to Palestinian farmland in Burqa, east of Ramallah, on Wednesday. Similar attacks by settlers were reported in several villages and towns in the southern Nablus governorate, damaging large swaths of agricultural land. The Good Shepherd Collective posted a video of settlers invading and setting fire to the village of Abu Falah near Turmosaya on Tuesday night, quote, "in order to erect a new outpost on lands belonging to the community." Meanwhile, Wafa added, settlers vandalized the sole pipeline supplying water to the Palestinian Bedouin community near Khan al-Ahmar, east of Jerusalem, the latest in an escalation of attacks against the village, as Israeli settlers and government officials threatened to destroy the entire community in order to expand one of the largest illegal settlement colony blocks in the occupied West Bank. In Lebanon, more than 40 people were killed and 140 wounded in Israeli strikes on Saturday, May 30th, alone. According to Lebanon's health ministry, Israeli attacks have killed more than 3,400 people and wounded nearly 11,000 since Israel's assaults escalated on March 2nd. The World Health Organization stated that there have been at least 190 attacks on healthcare facilities and personnel in Lebanon over the past 3 months, and warned that the country's health system is coming under growing strain. The WHO said that 17 hospitals have been partially damaged, and Israel has killed 128 health workers, including paramedics, and injured 332 others. Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta, who is currently working at a hospital in Beirut, posted on social media that he had 20 patients in his pediatric war injuries clinic on Wednesday for follow-up care. Quote, of the 20 children, Israel had killed one or both parents of 19 of them, he stated. On Wednesday, as Israeli airstrikes and attacks continued across the south, including on the ancient city of Sur, Israel announced a forced displacement order for the entire city of Nabatea. And on Thursday, our contributor Roqayah Chamseddine reported that there had already been 30 drone strikes, 43 airstrikes, and 7 cases of artillery shelling on South Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley. For more on the situation on the ground in Lebanon, Roqayah filed this report for the Electronic Intifada on Wednesday evening.
This is Roqayah Chamseddine reporting for the Electronic Intifada. Israeli aerial aggression across southern Lebanon has escalated to a deadly new threshold, directly targeting both the Lebanese armed forces and emergency rescue teams. In a clear and lethal escalation, the Lebanese military confirmed that a soldier was killed today when an Israeli strike targeted his vehicle along the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐿 road. The fatal attack comes amidst a broader, sweeping drone campaign that has struck at least 10 vehicles across the south today alone, including an attack on a military vehicle near Deir el-Zahrani that left an officer and a soldier wounded. At the same time, Israel has intensified its systematic targeting of humanitarian first responders, killing 4 paramedics in less than 24 hours. In Arab Salim, an Israeli drone strike killed a Risala Association paramedic, Ali Nasser. In Shur, 2 of his colleagues, Hassan Ali Muhammad and Muhammad Qasim, were killed in a deliberate strike on their ambulance. A separate drone strike in Zabdin targeted an Islamic Health Authority team, killing 1 paramedic, injuring another, and killing 2 wounded civilians that the medical team was desperately trying to evacuate. In the last 3 months alone, there have been over 190 documented Israeli attacks on healthcare facilities and health workers in Lebanon. These attacks completely shatter any illusion of there being a ceasefire. Israel's pattern of targeting state military personnel, hunting down civilian vehicles, and executing medical workers in the field shows a deliberate policy to paralyze the South, leaving the region entirely exposed as the international community looks on in silence. In another pressing development, Israel is attempting to manufacture consent for a deliberate bombing of South Lebanon's Sabnin Hospital, which is the South's largest and most vital medical facilities, by baselessly claiming Hezbollah has seized it or is utilizing it in some way. The hospital's administration has fiercely denied these allegations in a statement released earlier today, warning that they are intended to justify an Israeli attack. To completely refute these Israeli claims, the administration highlighted that the Lebanese army maintains a continuous daily presence and an active dispensary directly on the hospital campus. Furthermore, teams from the International Committee of the Red Cross operate on site. Labeling the unsubstantiated claims as a direct violation of international law, the hospital has even invited global media and independent monitors for immediate field visits, while urgently appealing to the Lebanese government and international bodies to protect the facility and its workers. To date, as of March 2nd, 3,516 people, including first responders, have been killed and 10,674 injured in U.S.-backed Israeli attacks on Lebanon.
That was Roqayah Chamseddine reporting for the Electronic Intifada from Lebanon on Wednesday. We've published many features in the last week, but today we're highlighting When the Lights Go Out, the Rats Come Out by Shoja Al-Safadi, writing from Gaza. He writes, in Arabic, there is a saying, many causes, one death. In Gaza, we are witness to these many causes of death, airstrikes, hunger, and contaminated water, to name a few. And now we see prospective death in the rats that move through the dark towards sleeping children. They come out when the battery dies on the lamp and the apartment goes dark. They come out when we are not around. That is when they feel safe. Our apartment building on Tal al-Hawa Street was bombed just 1 week bombed just 1 week before the so-called ceasefire in October 2025. Israel bombed the top 3 floors of the building, and the remaining 3 lower floors sustained partial damage. We are on the 3rd floor, and our apartment is missing some walls, the entire kitchen, all the windows and doors, and most of the furniture. Giant piles of rubble surround us on every side, and this is where the rats live. Protecting our apartment from rats would be a monumental task. With a small amount of rat poison not doing the job, I sought out construction materials myself, along with the help of friends, to repair and seal any openings in our house. Yet, given the Israeli blockade on materials needed to repair or insulate homes, cement, timber, and other so-called dual-use items, this would not be an easy task. All supplies have to be found through unofficial channels, so neighbors smuggle and sell cement and cinder blocks to each other, ripping what they can from collapsed walls and bombed-out homes. My friend Islam Bakr, 55, helped me search for materials for days. His own 7-story building, home to 30 apartments in Gaza City's Al-Daraj neighborhood, had suffered damage from Israeli strikes as well. The stairwell is cracked, and parts of the upper floors remain exposed after nearby strikes. As we searched for construction materials, he told me how the rats had invaded his family's food stockpiles: flour, rice, cheese, yeast, and dried legumes. This is food the family had obtained from aid trucks and markets and then stored because Gaza's food supplies are scarce and unstable. The rats nibbled away at their stockpile, contaminating the food. He found droppings in nearly every bag. He recalled how a 4-year-old child in a nearby tent was bitten. The family got treatment and the child recovered. But Islam said that it seems like most families do not seek medical attention unless injuries are severe, because getting to a hospital is its own ordeal. The rodent infestation in Gaza is not a story of one statistic or figure, but of several of them combined. The 57.5 million tons of rubble that fill the streets, the approximate 3,000 cubic meters of solid waste that accumulate each day, and the inaccessible landfills and destroyed sewage treatment infrastructure. In Gaza City, this collapse is visible along every street, especially in the piles of waste that are heaped along the street. At night, the smell intensifies, and it gets worse when residents burn garbage. Rubble, waste, and standing water have created ideal conditions for rodents. Then at night, they move into homes and shelters. Those are excerpts from When the Lights Go Out, the Rats Come Out by Shoja Al-Safari, writing from Gaza on electronicintifada.net. Shoja is a Palestinian writer and poet, a member of the Palestinian Writers Union, and a founder and director of the Friendship Cultural Forum from 2004 to 2014. And now, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and reclamation across Palestine and around the world. In Gaza, Hala Asusi, the founder of the youth group Al-Dawajin, met a young kite maker on the beach. She asks him why he makes them, and he replies, "So I can sell them and make a living." He says he uses pins, sticks, and plastic bags to assemble the kites, and that it takes him only 1 day to make one of his creations. Hela asks him what he wants to say to anyone who's bored and wants to play, and he laughs and says, "Make a kite." This video was made in April.
You're bored and you want to play? Look at this. He just made it with nothing. You have nothing to do. You want to spend some time playing. So they have their own way to spend time playing. احكي لي ليش عملتهم أصلا؟
عملتهم عشان أترزق أبيها.
إيش الأدوات اللي عملت فيها؟
دبابيس، عدان، أكياس.
كم أخذت وقت معك عشان تعمل هذا الإشي؟
يوم.
كل هدول يوم؟ ايش بتحب تحكي لاي حد زهقان وبده يلعب؟
اعمل طبق.
اعمل طبق.
And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora.
Hi.
It's good to see you and
You too.
to see everyone here in the chat. And thank you, everyone, for being with us on day 972 of this genocide that is intensifying in Gaza. And the conversation we're about to have with Ahmed Al-Najjar in Gaza is a really rich conversation.
Yeah.
We recorded it yesterday because it's still difficult to get a stable connection in Gaza. It's just not possible to do it live. But as you just reported, Nora, since yesterday, there's been just horrific massacres in Gaza since that conversation.
Right.
When I checked this morning, the health ministry said that 11 people had been murdered overnight since our conversation with Ahmed. So just utter horror.
It's utter horror. I mean, the images, and many of which I didn't show in the news report, of people being, once again, people being burned alive in their homes, in their beds while they were sleeping. 5 members of one family, only a 9-year-old girl is left. And she is, I mean, trauma doesn't even begin to encompass what that girl is now facing. And this is every day. This is shrugged off.
It doesn't make headlines.
By the West. It doesn't even make headlines.
It's politicians don't even have to pretend anymore that they're working. What was the phrase from AOC?
Working tirelessly for a ceasefire around the clock.
Yeah. They don't even have to pretend anymore.
No. It is obscene.
Yeah, it's up to us.
Yeah, that's why we're here. Right. Yeah. Well, we have so much to get to. We have this wonderful and very moving and informative conversation with Ahmed coming up, and then we're going to come back and talk about a report that you just wrote, Ali, about yet another facet of this, rape hoax that the Israelis are still trying to peddle. And then we have Jon. So we have a full show. Let's go to Ahmed and then we'll be back.
You're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Ali Abunimah, here with my colleague Nora Barrows-Friedman. In recent days, including over Eid al-Adha, Israel escalated its attacks on Gaza. Over the last 24 hours alone, the health ministry reported 3 Palestinians killed and more than 30 injured. Last Saturday, Israel murdered Dr. Jamal Abu Aoun, the head of the anesthesia department at Al-Yafa Medical Hospital in central Gaza's Deir al-Balah. He was killed in an airstrike near the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, also in Deir al-Balah. Since the start of the so-called ceasefire in October, Israel has killed 936 Palestinians in Gaza and injured almost 3,000, according to the latest figures from the health ministry. And since the start of the genocide, nearly 3 years ago, the confirmed death toll is now almost 73,000, with more than 173,000 people injured. Meanwhile, the United Nations said recently that the humanitarian situation in Gaza remains critical, with many displaced families continuing to shelter in overcrowded tents, schools, or damaged structures due to the lack of safe alternatives. Ahmed Al-Najjar is a Palestinian journalist and academic based in Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza Strip. He's been reporting from Gaza throughout the genocide. Among other outlets, he's written for Al Jazeera, and he also reports for Press TV. We're pleased to welcome him back to the Electronic Intifada live stream. Hi, Ahmed.
Hello, Ali. Hello, Nora. So good to be with you again. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So good to have you.
Thank you for joining us, Ahmed. Before I ask my first question, we can see behind you what looks like a tent moving in the wind, and we can hear the sounds of children. Can you just tell us, not specifically, but in general, where you are right now?
Yes. Hello, everyone, and welcome from Al-Mawasi. the infamous area where over hundreds of thousands of displaced Palestinians are squeezed right now. But somehow we managed to bring normal life as much as we can. I'm right now sitting in front of one of the tented classroom. This classroom was until 3 months ago just a white background, but recently we had some colors, so local volunteers painted it and made it more joyful, more normal for children here. And I'm sure you can hear the sound of children playing in the background. They're just trying to have some normal time away from the daily horror they've been going through. And under two Israeli drones. It's not always that normal, because it's mostly filled with other brutal aspects of suffering.
Well, we wish those children a peaceful and joyful life, something that
And something to say about it, it says our school is our second home. So honestly, when this camp was built, among the first steps was building this tented school to bring education for children, even at the heart of that suffering. Because education is in our hearts, is our way to survive, a way to rebuild, and we try to keep holding on to it.
Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
we know how hard people in Gaza are working to give children a taste of the normality that all children deserve. But the situation is very far from normal, Ahmed. And as I mentioned, with almost 1,000 people killed since the start of the so-called ceasefire, we know that the genocide never really stopped. What can you tell us about the apparent escalation in Israeli attacks in recent days and weeks and the impact it's having across Gaza?
Well, we usually go to sleep under the sounds of detonations. Most recently in Khan Yunis here, just massive sounds of explosions in the eastern parts that comes all the way to the western parts here. But in addition to that, we woke up this morning to a sound that we honestly haven't heard in a while, to the sounds of Israeli tanks shelling. So this was a recent development where they coming closer and start shelling. Of course, all in the eastern parts, they're empty of people, yet the sounds are clear, the shock waves can be felt. And the ongoing surveillance of their drones and the presence of aircrafts, jets, helicopters, Apache, and of course, military drones. So this is the typical reality where such military presence, the feeling of unsafety is always felt. But in addition to that, of course, is the daily loss of lives. Just over the past 3 hours, 2 brothers were murdered in central Gaza. A house was struck by an Israeli airstrike, and they were killed in addition to several injured. But before that, even we've been quite following the news with a sense of relief that no one has lost their life so far. But even without the strikes happening, even without the bombings happening, there are still people who can die because of their wounds. A woman this morning here in Khan Yunis died, succumbed to its injuries that she sustained over 10 days ago, right here in Al-Mawasi. Her tent, among several others, were bombed by 2 Israeli Apache missiles. Back then, 30 people were actually injured. And yesterday, 2 more tents right around our camp here were struck by Israeli drones, and at least 10 other people were killed. Sorry, they were wounded. No, they were wounded, yeah. And that's the reality that people inside these fragile tents are feeling. You can see the air moving them. So you can imagine what a falling missile can do to these tents, just falling and scattering to shrapnels that can kill you, can wound you. And that is what happened to little Minna Allah Abu Libda, who was murdered about 10 days ago in the same strike that the woman today was succumbed to its injury. This is Minna, a 6-year-old girl. She was playing in her camp, according to the local witnesses back then. Now, seeing Minna after she was bombed, and seeing the fact that she had a fracture in her hand when she was killed. This is her lying in the morgue's floor with her hand splintered and blood covers her body. For me personally, when I saw Minna, I could only think that she's the embodiment of our Gaza nowadays. We've been to more than 970 days now, this genocide, moving from one horror to another, from one suffering to another, and had our wounds that have not healed yet. Yet we're still under more blows, under more bombardments, under more brutality by the occupation that have not ceased for more than 970 days now. And of course, in addition to that, is the loss of dozens just over the past months. Actually, more than 119 people in May died, according to the Ministry of Health, because of the occupation's attack, which is considered the largest number of killing toll since the start of this year, surpassing 930 Palestinians who died under the auspices of the ceasefire that has not seized anything yet so far.
Ahmed, it is unbearable. Every day, as you report, as so many of your colleagues are reporting, that these attacks, these drone strikes, tank shellings, sniper fire, airstrikes keep happening under the auspices of this so-called ceasefire. And in the hospital, little Minna is there recovering from a previous injury. And she's killed in a tent where her family, has been displaced to who knows how many times. And in that same attack last week, a young mother was reportedly nursing her newborn son, and she was also killed in the strike. And the baby's leg was so severely injured that it had to be amputated. We're talking about these compounding injuries, these traumas that go completely unnoticed in the Western media. Everyone in the States or in Europe, they believe that there's an actual ceasefire here in Gaza. And as we know, that fraudulent ceasefire, which is really a public relations stunt to stop people from caring about Gaza anymore. It came with apparent promises that if Hamas ensured the return of all Israeli captives, there would be a huge influx in humanitarian aid and supplies for reconstruction. And of course, with that would be, expected to be medicine and gauze and, all sorts of basic supplies that people need. The Palestinians, of course, kept their part of the deal, but Israel and the United States, of course, have not. Talk about daily life in Gaza. What's the situation now with respect to access to food, water, healthcare, medicine, school, transportation? What is it like now, 7-8 months into this fraudulent ceasefire?
Yeah. So it's a ceasefire after all. It's a ceasefire that was brokered by the United States itself to bring an end to this genocide. But contrary to all predictions that we've had here, it seems like, and it is like, that all the stipulations of the ceasefire and all the conditions and all the predictions are going exactly the other way around. The hostilities have not ended. The relief that was promised has not been achieved, and the Israeli withdrawal has not happened. So this is basically the genocide still going on, but under the cover of that ceasefire that only exists on paper. For me personally, for the hundreds of thousands still squeezed here in Al-Mawasi, we've been promised to at least have some space to re-reside in, to move to go back to our neighborhoods, to go back to our cities. But that does not happen because the occupation is still holding control of more than 60% of the space inside the Gaza Strip. There has been the lines drawn and specified under the ceasefire terms right after the first phase of the deal be accomplished. The occupation will withdraw, will go to the pre-genocide borders, but that has not happened. What we've witnessed is the complete opposite: more expanding to the western parts, more control of land, and more demolition of homes that people are hoping to return to right now. If we talk about what is happening for people here in Khan Yunis specifically, if we can put up a picture I sent earlier, you might look at it and think that this is probably a border area, an area at the outskirts of Khan Yunis, given that it almost looks arid, completely demolished, save this building. But it's not. This is actually the heart of the city. This is the center of Khan Yunis city, once a vibrant neighborhood with businesses, shops, passers-by, cars, and of course, houses, warm houses sheltering their owners. But that was destroyed, like most of the Strip, most of the other cities. But what is actually interesting about this picture, that if you focused on this at the center of this picture, you'll notice almost a hill-like top on which there is an Israeli military base. And this military base can be seen from that location. So this is a more pushing forward into the heart of the city, more control of the land, and more demolition to ensure that the occupation can build these military bases and can entrench its presence on the ground. So this is not the withdrawal that the people were expecting. And that same scene repeats itself all the way in the eastern towns of Khan Yunis. So one who can go for a ride through the Salah ad-Din road, that if you remember was separating between the northern parts and the southern parts with the notorious Netzarim corridor. Thankfully, there is no Netzarim corridor anymore. There is no slicing between the north and the south. But there is a complete absence of the eastern parts of the Strip right now. Just all the way from the north to the south, you can see similar military bases, watchtowers that only makes it look like an occupation under an occupation that grows more and more with every day, with more control, more land seizing, and of course more killing to whoever dares to get closer to this notorious yellow line or orange line. And what we've been hearing just here in Khan Yunis, and over the past 3 days, over 20 different detonation operations by the occupation. So honestly, people no longer know what is there left of their towns or what is there left of their homes. The continuous sounds of these detonation, and if there will be any to return to should the occupation withdraw, and if this withdrawal will happen, and there will be some sort of relief, but it has not happened so far.
Ahmed, you talked about the yellow line, and under the so-called ceasefire agreement, Israel was supposed to remain temporarily in 53% of Gaza and to withdraw from the western part, and eventually to withdraw from that 53%. But as you said, Israel is expanding its control and its occupation on the ground. And recently, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the Israeli plan is to expand the occupation, the direct occupation, to 70% of Gaza. Of course, all of Gaza is besieged and surrounded by Israel, but the direct presence of Israeli troops. And you are talking about what that looks like on the ground. You've been telling us that. I have two questions for you. One is, in that eastern area beyond the so-called yellow line, which, as we know, keeps moving west, and it's not always clear where it is, are there any people still living there, or is that area totally empty? And also talk to us about the situation in Rafah, the city of Rafah, and the Rafah crossing, because as part of the ceasefire, the Rafah crossing, which is Gaza's only outlet to the outside world, that's on the border with Egypt rather than a border with Israel. That crossing was supposed to be opened. So talk about the situation beyond the green line, beyond the yellow line, so-called yellow line. Are there people there? And also talk about Rafah, please.
Well, talking about these actions carried by the occupation, it's not isolated actions by the troops or the brigades still deployed inside the strip. But as you mentioned, Ali, it is an official policy by the very occupation's government. The prime minister, we heard him saying that the ICC wanted prime minister saying that we're already controlling 60%, we're going for 70%, we'll keep tightening the grip on the Gaza Strip. But while tightening that grip, it's not just tightening grip on Hamas or whatever enemy it tries to describe. It is the tightening of more than 2 million Palestinians. And the fear of loss of life, the fear of bombardment, the fear of not being able to return to these areas ever. But in the eastern parts right now, that once were the home for hundreds of thousands of people, fertile, filled with fertile lands, adding to the considered the food basket to feed the Palestinians here. Everything has been bulldozed, everything has been demolished. All the buildings that are left there now are either used by the occupation or have been turned into a newly established military base like the one we've just shown. For Palestinians, it is an official, effective killing zone for anyone who dares to approach it. And as a matter of fact, today a man was extracted from the central Gaza, found near the eastern parts of the notorious Nazarene corridor. Of course, not in existence anymore, but he was pulled there after being shot by the occupation's fire. So this tells you what could happen to anyone who dares to approach that place. So a lot of Palestinians were hoping to go back there. A lot of people were hoping to go there and just stay on rubble, but that has not happened for them because it is still under the control of the Israeli occupation. In addition to that, we've witnessed a new phenomenon, a new old one over these months, which is the empowerment of local Israeli supported militias. Those, of course, you're aware of the notorious names. We're not going to name them, but they are the only ones who are given this privilege of being present and of being able to live inside these devastated areas, trying to draw in more people, but to do what? To go beyond tools for the occupation. We've seen the action that they have been carrying over the past months of the genocide, whether by blocking aid, controlling aid convoy, even taking part in killing and murdering Palestinians, whether they're in the eastern parts or at the western parts, for the sake of the occupation. They promote themselves as the anti-terrorism forces or the local forces, but they have been largely rejected by the Palestinian people here. Instead, they are still controlling and staying in those arid areas, most namely in Rafah city that has been considered a plight for a collective one for Palestinians here, because the city once sheltered more than 1 million Palestinians, including myself, from the north to the center to the south. All have been pushed to that city in the first 2 months. And after nearly 6 months of the start of the genocide, we've witnessed the American approval of a limited operation in Rafah city. But instead, that limited operation that started at the eastern outskirts in the city ended up with the full ethnic cleansing of its people. back in the January ceasefire 2025, people managed to return to some areas. They were grateful that some buildings were still standing. They were hopeful that they will be able to stay there. But instead, not only is Rafah, but also southern Khan Yunis here, which is my own town where I've been forced out for over a year now, with the second or 14th round of displacement, the second round of this genocide. Now officially southern Khan Yunis, all of Rafah city, the whole of the eastern line, in addition to northern Beit Hanun, are all still empty of their people, which really is seen as a practical steps on the ground of ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, instead of withdrawing and enabling them to return. So this is the policy that have been implemented not only by words and statement, but have been being enforced on the ground for months now, since the start of the so-called ceasefire.
And Ahmed, just about those militias, those collaborator gangs, we've spoken about them on this program before, and we've spoken to experts who say that these are made up of criminals, of people who have been involved in this kind of activity, and that their numbers are estimated to be in the hundreds. Is that what you understand, or is there any change in that situation? What can you tell from the ground in Gaza?
Well, as you mentioned, Ali, their background is largely a criminal one. Most of them have been convicted with multiple criminal records, have been put in jails, but as soon as the genocide started, they were able to run or to be released. And that small individual actions that were carried as vandalism, as terrorism against their own people here, starting in the areas that have been emptied very first months of the genocide, ended up into a large communities of these gangs, of course, under the supposed surveillance and protections of the Israeli occupations in the areas that are controlled by the occupation. But throughout this time, now more than 7 months into the ceasefire, and of course the ongoing developments that I'm sure many have been following, whether the confrontation between the occupation, with these gangs and security forces, and of course the calls from the families here, from their people, calling them to come back, to not take part in these actions that are not benefiting to anyone for the Palestinians here, that are only ensure the division of Palestinians and the implementing of what the occupation wants. So what we've seen and what we understand from local sources and from what we've been following is that the number which started by thousands have dropped now to somewhere between hundreds. Indeed, there are not official figures of that, but what we understand that more people have been trying to leave, and many people have made their way out, because that phenomena itself, that body, that is really founded and supported body, is rejected by the Palestinians here. No one wants to take part in being a tool or being a soldier under the army and under the occupation that has slaughtered their loved ones, that have been starving them, that have been depriving them of all necessities of life. So what people hope right now is that there will actually be once and for all complete withdrawal and an end to this vandalism, to this presence of these militias, because they have been doing is adding another layer of torment that people have to worry about, in addition to the Israeli bombs.
Ahmed, I want to ask you about people's access to water and food. And, again, these like preconditions that the US and Israel and Trump's, so-called board of peace have put on Palestinians, that only if they surrender and allow Israel to do whatever it wants to them, then they can get, full access to food and water and reconstruction materials and medicine and all of this. Can you talk about how people are able to access clean water right now, for example, and whether or not there is enough nutritious food in the markets, or if people even have the ability to find and purchase this kind of good food?
Well, people here have heard a lot of promises they've heard, whether of relief, whether of improvement, but between promises and what they have actually faced is a completely different thing. There has been a change since the ceasefire started. There was a relative improvement because, as you know, there was either a complete closure of the crossings, or there was a very little trickle of trucks of supplies been allowed by the occupation in the past brutal days before the ceasefire started. But after the ceasefire started, looking at the number and the statements and the promises, 600 trucks of aid food supplies were supposed to be allowed every day, 50 trucks of fuel, the heavy machinery to enter, the sheltering housing units to enter, but instead that has been violated by the occupation. Instead, the worrying about these numbers, the torment of following these numbers every single day, how much have been allowed, how much have not been allowed, is still going, it's still happening. It is torturing for people here. And just comparing the amount of supplies being allowed every day, two types. We're talking about aid supplies and commercial supplies. Almost in every day there is a shipment allowed by the occupation. The number of commercial supplies is higher than aid supplies, which means the availability of these supplies will be bigger for people here, of course, in the markets and the different makeshift markets here, which is something normal because, after all, people have to survive. But getting these supplies, food, furniture, anything that they want to get, means they need money, they need cash, they need livelihood. But for many families here, their livelihoods have been literally bombed by the occupation. Whether they had jobs, they had their own businesses, they had businesses that relied on internet or online, that all has been affected. And most of the population here have become jobless, dependent on aid that is still being restricted by the occupation. And probably an ironic thing that right now we're marking a year since the establishment of the notorious Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, founded by the United States and the Israeli occupation. Of course, everyone knows how that supposed mechanism for effective aid delivery turned into effective tool of killing and murdering for more than 2,500 starved Palestinians who were killed at sites. But that weaponization of aid that has been brought today in a recent report by the Doctors Without Borders, highlighting how the weaponization of aid remains an rejected tool by the international community, by different aid agencies who have been prevented by the occupation from bringing deliveries to the Strip normally. That weaponization of aid is still happening till this moment, whether by revoking licenses of more humanitarian organizations, by the restricting and shrinking of aid supplies to the Strip, and of course the controlling of what comes in and out for the providers for services here. You asked about water. Just today, brutally ironic thing is that the macro line, that is the line bringing water supplies from the occupied territories completely controlled by the occupation, was suspended today, apparently, according to the Khan Yunis municipality here, due to a malfunction. Of course, for being able to repair it, they're still waiting for clearance. by the occupation. Hours, it could take days. That shutting down only means that 3 large neighborhoods here in Khan Yunis are now prevented and denied from water. They have no other sources. The very sources are already little and very restricted here. They are in a form, trucks coming to people every single day. That truck comes, people have some water to drink. It doesn't, they won't. For the regular use, boreholes, wells operated by generators already depleted and consumed by long months of operation, by the need of spare parts. So it's a miracle that these sources are still operating and are definitely in urgent need of replacement as soon as possible. But all this compounded scene of deprivation, of weaponization of all sources of survival is still happening, and people are still being tormented under it.
It's really hard to imagine how people are coping day to day when every single thing is a struggle, and you know, it is so important to keep this visible because Gaza is not being talked about as much as it was, and we want to change that and keep Gaza front and center. But at the same time now, Ahmed, of course, there's a lot of focus on the Israeli massacres in Lebanon, the expansion of the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, and those massacres and that growing attack on Lebanon is also obstructing efforts by the United States to reach an agreement with Iran to end the war of aggression, which was launched by Israel and the United States on February 28. Iran is, of course, insisting that there can be no negotiations and no agreement without a ceasefire in Lebanon. So I'm expanding our view to the regional situation, Ahmed, because I want to ask you how people in Gaza, or if people in Gaza are following the regional situation, and if they see it connected to the situation in Gaza. Do they see any significance, any hope, any connection to the bigger regional picture to hopefully changing the situation on the ground in Gaza? What are you hearing from people?
Well, people here all agree on that it is here where this whole started, where these atrocities have been started and have been allowed to continue. And what they see right now is an extension of that flame to other places, to Lebanon, to Iran, to these different countries. But one thing that Palestinians try to keep themselves with every single day when they're busy surviving, when they're busy with securing what they need, is being up to date as much as possible. Because there are two contradictory, almost discourses here for people who are following this still ongoing, and between people who are afraid that from being neglected behind. So the continuation of the assault in Lebanon on Iran has not actually brought any change for Palestinians here. We've seen the occupation keeping effectively its hostilities, its bombardments, its killing against Palestinians here. So that itself was shocking for people here, for carrying these atrocities on these different fronts. But at the same time, people have felt a huge change over the past few months, which is being left behind in the media coverage, of being secondary news. Because for them, the reality has not changed. The atrocities are still happening, the suffering is still going on. Instead of being the #1 headline, they've been put to the 3rd and the 4th, or even at the end of the line, because more developments are happening and more raging flames are happening elsewhere. But one thing they know for sure, that at the end of the day and at the end of this cycle, this fire will go all the way around and come back to Gaza here. Because even if a ceasefire has been reached in other fronts, Palestinians have learned with the past brutal experiences that not a ceasefire, not previous ones, and not the current one, has brought an end to the Israeli hostilities. It is still going under another cover, another tools, another means, but the suffering is still the same. But what people have felt as well is the connection between the different peoples of these countries, between Lebanon and between Iran, because they see it as a punishing inflicted by the occupation on these countries, on the peoples of these countries, because of the solidarity by the Palestinians. By the solidarity here, people do not just see it as protesting or by words, but rather by actions that these countries have taken in solidarity with the Palestinians, people that have taken brutal aspects and have made them literally shirred in the blood. So for them right now, following the hardships and the atrocities committed and falling on other countries, it is felt as if it's falling on them here. What they are hoping for is a once and for all ceasefire, and the solidarity that they have actually felt and found tangible, that will one day be tangible in this multi-front ceasefire. They have been hearing about multi-front ceasefire, Iran, Lebanon, and Gaza, but until that happens, and the presence of the drones, that I'm not sure if you can hear them, disappear, and finally the sense of security and safety is felt again by Palestinians here, there is no true cessation for the fire that has been raging and surrounding them for more than 971 days so far.
Yeah, we can hear those drones. We can also hear the sounds of those kids behind you in that classroom playing as every kid deserves. And I wanted to ask you about how you're doing. Finally, you're a journalist. You've been reporting every single day for the last 970 odd days on this genocide. You've been displaced multiple times. What keeps you going? What motivates you? And how do you get up every morning and do your job? Yeah, tell us about that.
Nora, it's not by choice, but it's by being forced into this reality. Because whether you're a journalist or a doctor or a teacher, you're a Palestinian after all, or someone who is like everyone here, sharing this collective hardship, displacement, suffering, loss. We've lost family members, we've lost friends, we've lost our homes, we've been displaced dozens of times now. And so if you're someone with ability to give and to help and amplify the voices of your people, and you do not do that, especially at this time, and I'm not sure when that time will come. And because for journalists here, for media workers, there is a completely different war and struggle for keeping and amplifying the voices of Palestinians here. One thing we've seen recently, 2 days ago, is the occupation's ambassador to the United Nations 2 days ago holding a drone, claiming that it's from the Lebanese resistance, and complaining about how difficult it is to be under that drone and how hearing its sound, then it's too late. Well, in Gaza here, it's either two forms of death and killing for people here. It's either the quick one that doesn't give you a chance to listen to the sound of the missile and to the jet above your head, and either the slow, painful one. Every single night, we are under detonations, we are under bombardment, we are under fighter jets that have already literally slaughtered our own people, our own family members, and our own friends. So that is enough to wipe out your sanity, to leave you consumed by these hardships. But you try your best to survive, try your best to keep going, because what other choice do we have? What right do we have to stay silent? These tarpaulins have become our home. They have become our shelters. They have become our local communities. Here are small new communities of getting to know new people we have not met, to make new families and new friends we've never imagined we have will know. But this is life right now. Live it together with its bitterness, with its sweetness. And it's just not just the mental toll it's taking on you. It's actually the physical toll, whether by the occupation siege, by the deprivation. Everyone has already has its share. For Palestinians, there are more than 20,000 wounded people right now who are in desperate need of medical evacuation. Rafah crossing was supposed to open under the ceasefire terms. It has not. It has been also weaponized by the occupation. The 150 people who are supposed to leave every single day have dropped to a handful or dozens. Last week or 10 days ago, right before Eid, I was in a field hospital here for an surgical procedure. I had a small surgery in my leg, and I've actually been postponing it, trying my best to not go under it, because I know what it looks like inside hospital and what the level of restrictions that medical personnel suffer from. But at the end of the day, I had to go. So I was sitting there and I saw almost a dozen of people waiting their turn as well. Of these people, at least 5 were holding their formal papers, clearances of being already given clearance to leave and approved medically for this urgent evacuations. And their wounds and their injuries and their medical conditions compared to mine was nothing. All I had was a cut and then a few bandages and antibiotics. But for them, it is much more complicated, one that cannot be achieved in a healthcare system that has been decimated by the Israeli occupation. So amplifying the voices of these people is a #1 priority right now, in a time where the attention is being driven away from Gaza, in a time where the reality remains the same, this brutal reality that has not practically changed. All people are holding on to hope for people outside, like your noble selves, to keep amplifying their voices and keep speaking about Gaza until a just end is achieved for them.
Amen to that, Ahmed. We're so grateful to you for the time you spent with us. We will keep doing our best to amplify the voices of people in Gaza, to make sure attention stays on Gaza, and to do all we can. There are many people here watching who are active, and we hope others will become active in doing all they can to inform their own societies and to use the means they have to influence their governments to stop supporting this genocide. Ahmed Al-Najjar, you are a journalist and a researcher in Gaza. You are a compassionate human being, and we are so grateful to you for joining us, and we hope to speak to you again soon. And next time we hope that it will be under better circumstances. But in the meantime, what I'm going to remember from this conversation, in addition to your amazing words, is the sound of the children and not the sound of the drones.
Yes.
Correct.
Agreed.
Great. Hopefully that their voices will be over those planes and will eventually prevail. And hopefully that one day these children will meet you here in a free Gaza, in a free Palestine. And yeah, until that day comes, keep doing the great work you're doing. Keep this electronic intifada to amplify our cause, to amplify our voices until we meet in a free Palestine. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Nora.
Very soon.
Thank you so
Ahmed.
much. Yes. Thank you. What a remarkable journalist and person. I learned so much from him. And yeah, just I've been thinking about that since we did the interview yesterday about him sitting against that tent where the kids were playing inside and listening to those kids and trying to kind of tune out the sound of the drone as well. Just such dignity and integrity and commitment to the craft of journalism and to just being a person.
Yeah, and a very modest person too, because Ahmed didn't talk about the fact that he's involved in creating that school,
right,
for the children, and off camera he sort of, we didn't record it, but he sort of swept his camera around so we could see this school with all the brightly painted tents and everything beautifully clean, so that the children can have somewhere that feels a little bit normal. I mean, and nothing is normal, but just the energy and the love that people in Gaza are putting into trying to sustain life for themselves and each other, it really comes through. And he said it, they do it because they have to. Giving up is not an option.
There's no other
and it's
choice.
not an option for us. So we, I hope people really take Ahmed's words to heart. Keep talking about Gaza, keep pushing for an end to this genocide, an end to the complicity. That's our role.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking about not giving up and
complicity,
I mean, this is a story that you've been on for the last 2.5 years, and there's always something new, unfortunately, to report on. This is we're going to turn to a report that you just published a couple days ago. So let's get into that, and then we'll go to Jon. But this is just a reminder that you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman here with my colleague Ali Abunimah. A warning that this next segment includes explicit discussion of sexual violence. Ali, you have a new article out for the Electronic Intifada looking at the latest annual report to the UN Security Council by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on sexual violence in armed conflict. Ali's article is headlined, UN Verifies Rapes of Palestinians, but Still Cites No Israeli Victims. For the first time, the report names Israel's military and security forces in the UN list of parties credibly suspected of responsibility for patterns of rape or other forms of sexual violence. And the report contains a stark contrast. On the one hand, the UN has now verified multiple cases of rape and sexual torture by Israeli forces against Palestinians, including men, women, and children. On the other hand, nearly 3 years after October 7th, the UN still cites no verified Israeli victims of sexual violence by Palestinians. Yet, UN officials helped give global credibility to Israel's claims of mass rape on October 7th. Claims, of course, that were used to mobilize support for Israel's genocide in Gaza. Okay, so Ali, you've dug into this new report and the earlier UN claims. Let's start with what the new report actually verifies about sexual violence by Israeli forces against Palestinians. What are the numbers? What kinds of crimes are we talking about?
Yeah, thanks, Nora. Just for some context, this is an annual report that the UN Secretary General is mandated to give to the Security Council about sexual violence and armed conflict around the world. So it doesn't only deal with Palestine and Israel, but that's obviously what we're focusing on. The headline finding as far as Palestine is concerned is that the UN verified conflict-related sexual violence, including rape and torture by Israeli forces against 31 Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank. And on that basis, as you mentioned, it added Israel to that list of shame, that list of perpetrators. The victims were 14 men, 7 women, 9 boys, and 1 girl. And these are very serious allegations. The UN lists rape, rape with objects, gang rape, attempted rape, forced nudity, threats of rape, unwanted touching of breasts and genitals, genital violence, targeted shooting of the genitals, and strip and cavity searches without any apparent security justification. It includes rape and gang rape, sometimes repeated. This was verified against 9 victims, most of them from Gaza. And the perpetrators identified by the UN include the Israeli army, the Israel Prison Service, its Keter Special Forces, and Yamam, the police's so-called counterterrorism unit. These abuses took place mainly during detention and interrogation at prisons and detention sites, including Sde Teman, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐿, Megiddo, Ofer, Ramla, Hasharon, and the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 police station in the occupied West Bank. The victims included journalists and human rights defenders, and some of these Israeli violations were filmed or photographed, including one rape. Men and boys were subjected to rape, attempted rape, and genital violence. 5 male victims suffered severe rectal bleeding or swelling for days or weeks, in some cases without receiving any medical treatment. So this is the UN verifying Israeli sexual violence against Palestinians in a very concrete and specific way.
Using evidence and testimonies and videos and photographs. Yes, exactly. And the UN report also says these verified cases should not be understood as the full picture. Why not?
That's correct. The UN is very clear that these verified cases are indicative of broader incidents and patterns, not an comprehensive accounting. And regular viewers will think back to our discussion with Maha Husseini of Euromed a few months ago when we talked about the extensive research Euromed did, where they interviewed hundreds of people, and she said that virtually every former detainee, every former Palestinian who had been abducted by Israel and then released back to Gaza, almost everyone had experienced some form of sexual violence, and many of them horrific rapes. So the UN is confirming that. And there are 2 key reasons that the UN stresses for why there is these 31 cases are only a small subset of the reality. First, because Israel continues to deny UN investigators any access to detention sites and to Gaza. And secondly, the UN says that Israeli forces make explicit threats to Palestinians, to detainees, not to report abuse. So people are very scared that Israel will come after them and their families if they do. And so that's really crucial. But the UN is saying that it is verifying cases despite Israel blocking access and despite detainees being threatened not to speak. So when the UN verifies 31 Palestinian victims, that should definitely not be read as the total number. It should be read as the number of cases the UN was able to confirm under extremely obstructive conditions.
Yeah. And the report also talks about impunity. What does it say about accountability for Israeli forces, and how does the Sde Teman torture camp case fit in?
Well, it's no surprise to anyone. This report confirms Israel's long-standing failure to hold its forces accountable, and it says that has created a climate of impunity for these types of crimes. The clearest example is the case of the Sde Teman detention camp. 5 Israeli reserve soldiers were indicted in February of 2025 after severely assaulting a Palestinian detainee there in July 2024. According to the UN, the evidence included video, medical reports, and a detailed description of an assault that reportedly included inserting an object into the victim's anus, causing severe rectal injuries. This is the incident that prompted the infamous right to rape rallies, and where those accused soldiers were treated as heroes, are still treated as heroes, invited onto TV shows and so on. But even when they were indicted, that indictment did not include rape or sexual violence charges. And then in March of this year, all the charges were dropped. And in fact, the only person who's actually been pursued or punished in any way in association with this case is the Israeli military prosecutor who brought the charges. Her name is 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜𝐿, and she is accused of leaking that video. And amid the hatred and harassment she faced for bringing those charges, however short-lived, she apparently attempted suicide. So that tells you, how many Israeli prosecutors, even if they wanted to, are going to try and bring any kind of accountability in this atmosphere.
Right. And Ali, the other side of the report is what it does not say. After all the claims of mass rape on October 7th, which of course we've examined closely and debunked consistently, what does the UN actually cite now?
Well, this is really the central contrast in this report from the Secretary General. The UN has now verified rapes of Palestinians by Israeli forces, but it still cites no verified Israeli rape victims from 7 October. It still talks about mass sexual violence and rape, but the language in the two sections, in the different parts of the report, the one dealing with violence against Palestinians and the one dealing with violence against Israelis, as I've just explained, it talks about very specific Palestinian cases and uses the word verified repeatedly. It talks about these being verified cases. It does not use the word verified in that same way when it comes to Israelis. In fact, it says the opposite. So I'll give you an example. The report says that after 2 ceasefire deals in 2025, more than 50 Israeli captives held by Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups were released. 6 former Israeli captives, 3 men and 3 women, publicly alleged sexual violence. But the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres states plainly in this report that, quote, the United Nations was not able to verify any of these reports because Israel continues to deny access to competent UN bodies to carry out investigations. Guterres also notes that the UN has, quote, not as yet received information on indictments by the authorities in Israel for charges of sexual violence against detained Palestinians accused of involvement in the attacks. So no victims, no perpetrators identified. And this comes after almost 3 years of propaganda about mass rape, organized sexual violence, rape as a weapon of war, and so on. The UN still does not cite a single verified Israeli rape victim. The UN should be transparent about how it rushed to judgment and withdraw its claims if it can't support them, but instead it's allowing this narrative to persist despite the acknowledged lack of evidence.
Incredible. Ali, let's talk about Pramila Patten, the UN Special Representative on Sexual Violence in Conflict. Her March 2024 report, which you covered extensively, was widely presented as backing Israel's claims, of course, with no evidence. But you argue that her own findings did not support the way those claims were promoted. What happened there?
Yes. So just a reminder, Pramila Patten led a mission to Israel in early 2024. Her report published in 2024 was widely covered, and it was treated as if, you still see references to it this way, as if the UN had corroborated and confirmed Israel's mass rape narrative. But as we've reported consistently, when you read the fine print, the report did not verify rape and sexual violence on 7 October. It actually stated that Patten's team could not identify tangible indications of rape in available photos and videos. It noted the lack of forensic evidence, that they were unable to meet any survivors. It said no digital evidence specifically depicting acts of sexual violence was found. The reason I'm recalling that now is because Pramila Patten held a press conference last week to launch this new report from the UN Secretary General. And at that press conference, she reconfirmed that she did not meet with any survivor of supposed 7 October sexual attacks during that 2024 visit. And there was a very interesting exchange at that press conference between France 24 correspondent Jessica Le Mazurier and Pramila Patten. And let's take a look at that video now from this press conference last week.
To some.
Hello, Jessica from France 24. Thank you for this briefing. I'm looking at your report right now, and I see that you say that there were videos of the abuse of Palestinian detainees and photos. Did you see these videos and photos? Would you describe them as evidence? I'd also like to know if, I remember when you had your visit to Israel, you told me that you were not able to seek any evidence. If now, with hindsight, you regret that trip, seeing as it caused so many issues regarding actually being able to draw clear conclusions based on evidence, and what steps you've taken to avoid finding yourself in that situation in future. I'd also like to know in which areas you are lacking funding for your work, and what the reason for this is, and if it can be attributed at all to a withdrawal of US funding for some issues that they considered gendered.
Well, thank you for your question. I mean, like I said, I receive information from UN human rights monitors. I mean, like, I do not have the mandate to go out myself. And I must say, and I've said it in the past, that the visit to Israel in 2024 was of an exceptional nature because of lack of access to relevant UN human rights monitors. And that would have meant that there would have been nothing in the Secretary General's report on the 7th of October attacks of 2023. And in my report, I have explained the exceptional nature, and I have made it very clear that the mission was not investigative in nature.
Ali, what stood out for you in Pramila Patten's answer there?
Yeah, if you listen to it very carefully, first of all, let me say that Jessica Lemazurier's question was very important, and that stood out because it's very rare to see this kind of pushback from a mainstream journalist saying, compared with what you said in 2024, this is all, the Palestinian victims, that's all documented with photos and videos, whereas in 2024, you really didn't come back with anything. So the reporter was contrasting the concrete evidence of Israeli sexual crimes against Palestinians on the one hand with the lack of evidence in Pramila Patten's 2024 claims about October 7. And Pramila Patten's answer was quite evasive, but she says her 2024 visit was of an exceptional nature because of the lack of access to relevant UN human rights monitors. And note how she said that if she had not gone to Israel, where, there are so many photos of her that were put out by the Israeli Foreign Ministry visiting kibbutzes and meeting with people. I mean, it was a propaganda trip that Israel exploited to the full. But she said that if she had not gone on that 2024 trip, there would have been nothing in last year's Secretary General's report related to the 7 October attacks. So what she appears to be saying is that in the absence of proper access and credible evidence, she went anyway and produced a report that was basically full of Israel's unverified claims. And her 2024 report is still being used to give credibility to Israel's atrocity propaganda. You should let's recall that last year, the UN Secretary General added Hamas, but not Israel, to that list of shame. So Pramila Patten and the UN Secretary General preferred to put in Israel's unverified claims just to have something in the report, rather than to say, well, we're going to wait until Israel grants us access to do a proper investigation. And when the relevant UN bodies can do a proper investigation, then we'll include the results in a report. That's what they should have said. Meanwhile, the actual verified sexual violence is by Israeli forces against Palestinians. really, I think at this point, this far down the road, the UN should be correcting the record, not sticking by unverified claims that have been used to help justify genocide. And what's striking to me is how this new UN report, just like all UN reports, constantly demands accountability. That word is in there many, many times from alleged perpetrators. But what about accountability for UN officials from the Secretary General on down, who intentionally or not have amplified and given the UN stamp of credibility and approval to Israel's genocidal lies? When will there be accountability for them?
That is the question. Thank you so much for that, Ali. And if people want to read more details about the report that you analyze so thoroughly every time, it's up now on electronicintifada.net. The article is entitled UN Verifies Rapes of Palestinians, but Still Cites No Israeli Victims. And that was published just on Tuesday. Thank you so much, Ali. And I know, unfortunately, we will still be reporting on this in the coming days, weeks, months, until it is thoroughly out because of lack of evidence. So thank you. Let's bring Jon on. Hey, Jon.
Hello.
Hi, Jon.
Speaking of evidence, which there is plenty.
That story is just... I remember the first day I heard that story, and I was like, there's no way that's true.
No.
And I spent weeks looking through hundreds, if not thousands of videos and seeing nothing even close to what.
Of course. But the UN just gets to take Israel's word because that's what they do. And
well, the funny thing, just a sort of final afterthought, I didn't mention this in the article, but in the Secretary General's report, he takes Hamas to task for not recognizing any, that's the word he uses, Hamas has refused to recognize any incidents of sexual violence. Well, you can't point to any. So what do you want Hamas to recognize? You can't even point to any.
Right. It's I don't know. It makes your brain melt the more you think about it. It's just like, it's so consistent and so completely devoid of any rational thought. And it keeps,
like Trump told Netanyahu, everyone hates Israel now.
Right.
He said other stuff too, but
while he was writing a check, right?
This is a family show, so we won't repeat that.
That's right. All right. Well, Jon, there has been so much that happened in the last week. I know you're going to talk about the fight that Hezbollah keeps putting up against the Israeli invaders in South Lebanon, especially. Give us a sense of what you're going to be covering. Anything new and out of the ordinary this week?
Yeah, thermal night vision FPV drones now striking the Israelis at night, and they had been denying it for weeks that it was happening, and they finally had to admit it yesterday when Hezbollah released 4 more videos, although you guys know I've shown multiple thermal imaging camera drone shots over the last number of weeks, but Israel denied that they existed until late last night when they finally admitted it.
Incredible. All right, Ali, do the honors.
Take it away, Jon.
All right, you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report on day 972 of the genocide in Gaza and day 95 of Hezbollah's defense of South Lebanon. We'll start with the maps as always. This week, the Israeli military announced what we have been tracking on this program for the last number of weeks, and that is pretty significant troop withdrawals from the south. The 146th Division has left the western sector. That's where we were watching them empty their bases out in Al-Bayada, just north of Nakura there on the western coast that you see above the blue line. There's operations in Bint Jbeil this week and to the north in Hadatha. and then up on the Galilee Panhandle, if you follow it across, up to the Beaufort Castle, which is up near Yahmar, that you see north of Metula there. We'll get more into that as the show goes on. If we look at the next map, you can see where the Israeli military's genocidal zone is. This is the ethnic cleansing zone that Israel has promised to leave people with nowhere to return home to. They're not fighting Hezbollah. They are destroying civilian homes. But because of resistance operations, those demolition operations have been curtailed over the last week. We'll see if that holds. There is a lot of battlefield adaptation on both sides going on, so we don't want to make any claims that will hold for in perpetuity, but what we're seeing in these last 7 days is a significant withdrawal of engineering vehicles as well. There's more than 60 villages that are in that targeted zone. And that zone, just to reiterate, that does not mean Israeli military control. It's the areas that Israel's bombing and shelling, and in some of the areas, hand carrying or humping on armored vehicles, explosives like they did in Gaza to destroy civilian homes because they fail on the battlefield. And that is a consistent trend that we have been tracking now for nearly 1,000 days. Let's look at the next map. This is from the Institute for the Study of War, which shows a little bit more accurately where the Israeli military is not. That yellow line is the line that Israel declared that was their operational line. You can see the Litani River in the north there. That is supposed to be the entire area south of the Litani is under evacuation orders. There's 1 million plus people displaced and thousands being killed, more than 3,500 killed, more than 10,000 wounded, including 160 paramedics and first responders, which is just deepens the criminality of Israel, because of course those civil defense and first responders are truly the best of us to be in the war zone and to be the only people in the war zone that are there to help. So just really egregious criminal acts by Israel. Many of them we've watched on camera, double tap strikes. So that has continued. There's 60 villages, like I said, in that zone that Israel is attempting to demolish. We could take a look at the next map, which is a little more detailed, and we could see all the areas that we're going to cover on this program from the western coast, the Israeli military base just below the blue line there, Rosh Hanikra, was targeted. Israeli bases along the blue line in the central area, Zarit. We're going to see those bases targeted, going up the Galilee Panhandle up to the Beaufort Castle, which I will finish this program on. Israel's photo op in the castle made international news this week. Somehow they know that they can do that, despite the fact that we just listened to an excellent interview from Ahmed Al-Najjar in Gaza. And Gaza doesn't even get a news article, let alone international headlines like Israel's photo op got. You can also see in the center, pretty much in the center of that map, Hadassah. That is going to be an area where we are going to start this week. Let's look at video number 5. This is an 18-hour battle spread over 2 days. And it's really the first time we've seen fighters on the ground in these videos. These fighters are saying that they're waiting for vehicles that they detected on the road moving north from Rashaf, up the Rashaf road to Hadassah. You can see the sniper there with his Dragunov sniper rifle getting ready. Scenes that remind us of what we saw in Gaza. Here we're seeing an M113. This is the remotely operated armored personnel carrier dropping off explosive ordnance. We covered these extensively in Gaza, these robot bombs. They're using them to demolish houses. And here we see the fighters together getting their appropriate weaponry prepared, their RPG-7s with their PG-7VL warheads, which is the same warhead that we're seeing on the quadcopter drones. That's that PKM machine gun. that we're seeing and fighters moving. These are explosive devices that Hezbollah's OPSEC doesn't want us to see, but are planted alongside of the road. And the fighters say to each other that they are waiting for each other. The fighter says these explosive devices were planted by us in case the enemy's tanks tried to advance. The fighter says to the other fighter, "What do you want to say?" And the fighter says, "The bulldozers and the tanks are outside." Here you see the Radwan unit force. This is special forces. You can see the emblem on their uniforms there. The Radwan forces named after Haj Radwan and Ahmed Al-Najjar, who created those forces. And here the fighters are outside confronting at 8:45. Up in the top corner, you can see the beginning of an Israeli incursion into Hadassah. This is the fourth attempt that the Israeli military has tried to take Hadassah, and it's being repelled here again. As of yesterday, there's been 9 attempts repelled. You can see the gunfire here. This is a firefight against Israeli troops, and we're going to have audio here in a moment. That last that you heard was air support, using fighter jets as air support. The fighters say here yesterday, the fighters are in this clash here that goes on for 18 hours. There was more than 7 rocket operations, 9 anti-tank operations, 3 bulldozers destroyed. You can see the missile fire and rocket fire on the top of the screen through there. It's difficult to see this operation, but this is really the first on-the-ground firefight footage that we have seen from Hezbollah. And just to give you a sense, in the last week, out of 160 field reports, there was only 2 firefights in the entire week. So the Israelis don't want the smoke. They don't want to fight. They don't want to fight Hezbollah. Here the fighters are saying, here yesterday, the clashes were taking place on this road. They tried to advance, and we blew up 3 bulldozers. And we chased the 4th bulldozer, and the fighter says that they're going to take us and show us the bulldozer here. So we're going to go with these fighters down the road, and there you see the D9 armored bulldozer disabled there from one. That's one of the 4 bulldozers that were targeted. This fighter takes you down the road, and he says, "Look at what we did. These weak Israelis. This bulldozer can't even move anymore. It can't advance. We crushed it under our feet." And then he says, "Whoever wants to come after it, we're going to sit here and wait for you." And then they quote Nasrallah saying, "You will have no tanks left," which Nasrallah said before the invasion of Lebanon coming out of Gaza. And the fighters here add not just tanks, but also bulldozers. "We added that," he says. And then he again quotes Nasrallah saying that, "We will return home. All the people of the South will return home with your heads held high. The entire land will be liberated." So the defense of Hadassah is still ongoing. Like I said, last night there was the 9th attempt on it, and still the Israeli military unable to take the town. They just pull away. They pull out every time that there's contact. They basically pull out and call in air support, which is what we saw in that video previously. Okay, let's take a look at number 6, because major targets this week along the border, the Israeli military bases along the border, using these first-person view quadcopters. This is a second one, a 2 quadcopter strike. The first strike killed a soldier. The Israeli military said she was running away, and the drone caught them. Here's a utility vehicle also running away and getting caught and hit by the drone. And this is on the base near Shomera in the north central area of Israel. You can see that strike, and we can see in the next footage still, we got a battle damage assessment from the Israeli military, which is very odd. They military censorship makes reporting on this almost absurd. But this battle damage assessment, this photograph came from this base, and in the article, the core of the article was about the people on this base and living around this base, saying that when they're anonymized all the time, and you don't say, Israel doesn't say the locations that all of these places are struck. You have to figure them out. that they're being ignored. And so they wanted their story told. And so they took some photos of the battle damage assessment of this vehicle upturned, upside down. 2 were wounded there. So 3 casualties in that attack on that single base earlier in the week. Again, all these operations you're going to see are all from the past week. Let's take a look at number 8. This is on the coast. This is on the coast. They're going to hit the Ras Hanikra base. That's on the other side of Ras Nakura, is the Lebanese side of the border. This is a naval base, Israeli Naval Command base, and you can see the drones catching up here to a truck inside, a car inside the closed military zone of the base, strikes it from behind, and this is also going to be a multiple drone strike on this particular position. So the car is hit there, and then you're going to see the battle damage assessment as this second FPV drone comes up the same roadway. There you can see the spot where it was struck. Hezbollah is showing that handy for us. It's the crater where the strike was. And you're going to see off to the side some burning here, and it's going to go to the parking lot and strike another vehicle. Again, hitting these soft vehicles on the military bases, something that we've seen them do particularly in recent weeks. There you can see the burning from the strike as well. So this is on the western coast. The Israeli military is largely pulled out of here, as I said on the opening. The 146th Division pulled out of this sector. When we started these reports 13 weeks ago, there was 5 Israeli divisions in Lebanon. Today, there is now 2. And the Israelis take time before they don't just announce when the soldiers leave. So we've observed the fact that they pulled out. Here comes the Humvee, targets in on the Humvee and a direct strike on the Humvee. So we showed over the last few weeks, emptied forward bases, emptied positions, the artillery position in Bayada, emptied out. We saw the flag lowering ceremony that Hezbollah executed with the drone strike on the Israeli flag. Those were all obviously pointed to the fact that there was no more Israeli presence or just a skeletal presence in that area. And the Israelis confirmed it this week. Let's go to the next one. Is also on a base. This is the Manara outpost. You can see this is a major, they have a lot of technology on this outpost that we watched get hit over and over again in the early stages of the war in Gaza when Hezbollah was a support front. You're going to see the drone hone in here on a light armored vehicle. And again, with the PG 7VL, this is going to destroy this vehicle. These hits are 100% destruction rate with the type of weapon that they are using. Let's take a look at number 10 here. We're going to hit some Iron Domes, Iron Dome launchers. There you see it in the right on the screen there. Multi-million-dollar launcher with multi-million-dollar interceptor missiles inside it. It's going to do a little stroll around a little recon stroll to see that there are multiple launchers here that are going to get hit. This is drone number 1 coming up beside it here and targeting directly this missile firing unit for the Iron Dome launcher. If it's loaded and it's totally destroyed, you're looking at $3+ million for each one of these strikes. That's the first one. So this is FPV number 2. Following it up, you're going to see the battle damage assessment in the bottom left corner there from the first strike. There it is, Hezbollah showing it to us. And this second drone is going to go around and pop the other one. So both missile firing units on this base are destroyed. There's only 3 or 4 per battery. So these are leaving a mark. We're going to see in the next video one of the positions abandoned. They didn't even replace the launchers that were struck. So here you come in again. The FPV drone does not care that you have blast walls set up around it. They just fly around it. Those were set up for anti-tank guided missile strikes. So destroying that one. And then next one is in, this is in the central area at the Baranit barracks. This is the headquarters for the 91st Galilee Division. So two of the divisions that are left, the 36th Division and the 91st Division. The 91st is a territorial division. There you can see 5 missing interceptors there. You can see the 2, maybe it's 4 missing interceptors there, $100,000 each for a Tamar interceptor. And Israel has said that they have been using the Iron Dome to shoot down these quadcopters. But I mean, this would be a good time to shoot it down, and it doesn't seem to be able to do that. One more, also on the western sector at the Jalal Alam base here. Again, you can see it flying over the wall. So now we're inside Israel. You can see the dual launchers there. This is one of 19 missile firing units that Hezbollah has destroyed since this war began. This round of the war began. So you just watched, I don't know, let's say $12 million in Iron Domes be destroyed in that last minute or so. Let's take a look at 13, because these outposts along the border, we've constantly watched these borders be like complete ghost towns. These are supposed to be functioning borders. They're supposed to be supplying a rear supply for the frontline troops. And you can see there's never any soldiers visible in any of these bases. So the bases are not functioning the way that they're intended to function. So here they're going to go into the mess tent and deliver this into the mess tent and saying, "Where are you? We're waiting for you to emerge from your holes," they say there. But this is into the mess tent in this particular base. The bases are basically empty. You can see that is empty as well. The next one is at the base of the Galilee Panhandle. This is Avivim base. And you're going to see in this one, I reported a couple weeks ago that Israel is putting 158,000 square meters of netting to put up over everything. Volleyball net, fishing net, the whole deal. Look on the bottom right there. You're going to fly over the netting right there on the bottom left. That was supposed to be for covering that base, and they hit inside the base housing on that operation. So these hits are, I mean, an anti-tank weapon will destroy that door. Some people ask why they hit the doors, but the door will trigger it and send the molten dart inside of the base housing. Let's take a look at number 15, an attack on a Namur troop carrier here. And the Israelis this week admitted 2 strikes on Namur troop carriers have penetrated the cabin and killed and wounded soldiers inside. That one hits the remote-controlled weapon station, the mounted machine gun on it. But as we go along, I'll describe some of the operations that penetrated those tanks. Let's take a look at 16 excavators. Of the 160 field reports this week, 36 of them were FPV drone strikes. 3 of them against excavators and D9s. So that's what you're seeing here. Another one against a 𝐓𝐡𝐞 vehicle that we'll see coming up. So again, targeting these logistical vehicles that we're seeing less and less of because they're just such prime targets to be destroyed. So that was 16. We're at 17. This is a twin strike. If you look on the upper right there, you can see the drone. FPV drone 2 is recording FPV drone 1. You can see it just below the, just above the house there. It's over to the side now. It's going to come swoop around in front of you. You can see it there. You can see the the warhead. You can see the fiber optic spool. So that's a fiber optic spool. And there's the tank hit directly on those tanks, on that tank. Can't see exactly where on the tank it strikes. But these are the kind of battle damage assessments that people were wanting to see, to send a second drone to show you. And then this drone's going to fly over and show, again, the absurdity of these nettings before it looks for its own target. The town here is, again, slated for destruction, but this is where the Israelis pull back to every time they try to advance to Hadassah. up this Rasha Hadatha road. And there, look at the tent. The tent is completely it's just a fortress of netting in front of that tank there. Not sure that's a successful strike, but if you can see the level of absurdity that they're going to cover these $6 million armored vehicles that should be battle ready. You'd think if you are fighting an insurgency, if you are fighting a war, that your troops would occasionally need to run into their tanks and mobilize. But obviously you can tell by this that they're just dumping this fishing net on them, and it would take many minutes outside in danger to uncover the tank just to get moving on it. The whole time you're susceptible to a strike. Let's look at 18 because we got Tamara did a nice little zoom in on here so we can see it a little bit better. You can see it, the drone over to the right there, and it's got its own white circle. You see the red circle around the tank, and the drone's going to come. You can see the spool in this part right here. You can see the spool and the warhead and that direct strike on the tank. The commander of the 401st Armored Brigade, who I covered a couple weeks ago, he spoke this week and he said to his soldiers, "I know you continue to fight with strength and that you have had many difficult days with casualties in the 601st and 9th battalions." So they're very aware that they're getting hit hard, and that commander spoke of it. Let's do 19. We've got another 2 drones here. So we're seeing mini swarms here. This is in Devo. You're going to see a number of targets that the operator can choose from. The first strike is going to be on the Namur troop carrier. And on this weekend, Namur troop carrier was penetrated by an FPV drone, killing a member. That's a mobility kill on the tracks for sure. But so he's going to strike the tracks there. You can see he clearly aimed at that. And then you can see the smoke for the battle damage assessment that people like. And then the pilot here, the second pilot, is going to target one of these M113 robot bombs, the rolling bombs, the tank bombs, the vehicle-borne IEDs that Israel created to destroy Gaza, to use these old, out-of-stock armored vehicles and to destroy them. There's the Namur that was hit. And there is the robot bomb hit and destroyed. And these robot bombs are strictly for demolition. They're strictly a war crime vehicle targeting civilians. So that, are we at 20? Yeah, 20. This one was from the other day, and I think it just got the wrong card because Hezbollah said this was an Iron Dome launcher, but it's actually a water truck, and you could see it directly hit. So logistical vehicles like this, I'm pretty sure it's a water truck. It's covered here. You can see it's also covered by tactical netting, more appropriate netting than the volleyball net that we see all the time. But destroying these HEMETs, again, if you can't fight without water on the front line. So these kind of strikes, which have 100% destruction rate, are quality strikes. Let's look at 21, because this week there was a number of these. Every week they are. Often just can't fit them all in, these rocket, drone, and artillery operations. But these are Pava cruise missiles. These are significant weapons that can carry a warhead of several hundred, 200 to 300 are usually a kilogram warhead, and they can reach anywhere in Israel. We saw Iran fire these land attack cruise missiles during the Operation True Promises 1 and 2. So this is Hezbollah launching 3 of those at the Galilee Panhandle on Wednesday versus troops in Odessa, versus troops in Zabta al-Shakia. And these can be a very potent weapon. They're accurate. They can be guided in flight. And they carry a significant warhead. So we saw a number of these operations this week. Missile and drone attacks this week, 28 of them compared to 36 FPV drone strikes. So we're talking FPV drones are only half of the drone strikes that are executed each week. Let's look at number 22, because we also saw Hezbollah escalate in response to the Israeli escalation and fired barrages of rockets all day long on Sunday and late Saturday, after the Israelis expanded their invasion in Lebanon and started attacking Tyre, Sur, the major city in the south. And the Israeli military knew it. They said this 2 days before. They said the IDF says it is prepared for the possibility of increased Hezbollah rocket fire on northern Israel as troops push deeper into southern Lebanon, following the expansion of IDF operations and in accordance with situational assessments. The IDF is preparing for the possibility of major fire from Lebanese territory, and that in fact did happen. You're seeing 122 millimeter Grad rockets here. These are the Katyusha rockets, as everyone calls them in this in Lebanon. These are the Katyushas that the Israelis are trying to push back from the border. Is their thin excuse for essentially their genocidal rampage against Shia in the south. But as Israel predicted, the expansion took the targeting into Israel. Hezbollah following a rules of engagement, honorably following rules of engagement that Israel, one would think, doesn't deserve after 2 years plus of genocide and observing no rules. But these are Israeli cameras recording the rocket strikes. So there was 89 rocket and artillery attacks in the past 7 days since you last saw me. Most of these were concentrated on Saturday and Sunday. And I'm not even going to get into the ceasefire stuff, because I just think it's at this point, everyone that watches this show knows there's not going to be a ceasefire. And if there is, then the firing won't cease during it. So what the point of that is a little bit beyond me. Let's take a look at 24. This is an Ababil drone. Hezbollah calls it the Mersad. It's an Ababil T drone that Iran uses. It carries a 30-kilogram warhead. So again, significant weapon that could be guided. This is a one-way attack drone. And sometimes when you're looking through the field reports and trying to pull data, it can be confusing if they're talking about an FPV drone or if they're talking about these one-way attack drones, especially since Hezbollah just last week started calling the FPV drones Ababil drones. So let's look at 25. We have audio in for the result of that strike, that launch that we just saw. Yo. Came in on that base, 4 soldiers wounded. So there you saw it going out, and there you see it coming in. The Ababil drone strike directly on the Beit Hillel base. So accurate targeting of soldiers, not targeting civilians. The juxtaposition between the way Hezbollah fights and the way Israel fights couldn't be more stark. Now, the story of the week, the Israeli military this week moved forward. We can look at this map that I brought just so you didn't have to remember from the beginning of the show. But you can see Beaufort Castle over there on the eastern side above Metula. It's just above the top of the Galilee Panhandle. And it's actually only 4 kilometers from the border. So Israel made a big show of taking this castle that Hezbollah was not holding, to take this castle, which has a history. In 1982, the PLO defended this castle when the Israelis invaded. And a number of Israeli soldiers, 6 Israeli soldiers from the Golani Brigade, were killed in that operation. It's the Golani Brigade this time that went up into the Beaufort Castle this week as well. And once they did that and took pictures, the international media treated it as if this was some kind of major victory, which is exactly the point of why Israel did it, trying to find fake victory images in an otherwise quagmire of resistance in South Lebanon. But the Beaufort Castle is a 12th century Crusader castle. And we're going to see Hezbollah attacking the Israeli troops on the lead up to this in number 27. You're going to see a tank get struck here. 1/3 of FPV operations this week targeted tanks. So again, they're targeting tanks at a lower rate, significantly lower rate than we saw early on in the war. But as I said, the Israelis have admitted to the penetration of the cabin of 2 Namr troop carriers. That's against the rear door. The Namr has the same hull as the Merkava tank, so they're the same vehicle. So if you're penetrating the Namr, you're presumably capable of penetrating the Merkava too, although they are lower success rate for sure on those. So that was 27. Let's look at 28 here. You can see the castle on the hilltop there. You could just see these, for military purposes, holding this high ground is somewhat useful. It gives you fire control over the valleys, but it also, in the age of FPV drones, like we're watching right now, it leaves you as a sitting duck, sitting in this Crusader castle without really much military advantage to holding it, other than the symbolism. The Israelis are, there's the tank there. It's going to get struck, or the building is going to get struck. You can see beside the tank, you can see the soldiers here, the little guys running. You can see them running into the building there, 2 or 3 of them. And then the buildings that they're using for cover is going to get struck. And then the second drone is going to follow up with this operation there. You can see the castle on the left there. And the approaches to them are challenging, but they weren't defended. So Israel was able to get up there, although they took significant casualties, at least 30 casualties, getting up onto this hill, getting struck by Hezbollah. This follow-up strike is going to be on a Humvee, but you can see the battle damage assessment from that first strike. So clearly penetrated that building and struck a Humvee there. So yeah, the Golani Brigade lost 6 soldiers trying to take the castle in 1982 against the PLO. And they have so far lost at least 3 trying to take it against Hezbollah. Let's look at number 29, because we are seeing here soldiers being chased down, individual soldiers. 3 soldiers were killed in the over the weekend, this weekend. 2 of them were killed at night. And we saw that, I've shown you a couple thermal imaging FPV drone strikes before, but the Israelis denied that that was happening. There you can see the soldiers fleeing, running away, and getting struck through the bush there at the Beaufort Castle, around the Beaufort Castle. This is on the lead up to it. Let's take a look at number 30. Again, all around the castle, it leaves their vehicles in these approaches very susceptible. The map, an inset map, shows you just how few roads there are and passageways up to the photo op that Israel took really quickly and then fled. They did another one the other day where they did a handover, a leadership handover of the 36th Division and the Golani Brigade, and they did it on the castle, but again, ran away immediately after. This is going to be a shot right in the turret gap, which is exactly where you want to strike on those vehicles, according to the Qassam Brigade's breakdown of where to target tanks that we saw in Gaza. Let's take a look at 31, because here's the thermal imaging cameras. Here it is. So this is Hezbollah's response to Israel's photo op. So this is them flying a thermal camera over the castle here the night after the Israelis said that they had taken it. And those photos went all around the world. And it was literally the headline in languages all across the world. It's really it's bizarre to watch that happen when they're able to plant a story like that, and it just gets picked up by everybody, no doubt. This is an interesting piece of geography. It's a 12th century castle, but its military significance is extremely thin. But again, the flight over, you don't see any soldiers. This looks like when we fly over every other base or every other position. You just can't see any soldiers here And now Hezbollah is going to show you on the inset there of the videos. This is the photo op videos. So they're showing the same places with these thermal cameras. So the thermal cameras were denied all up until last night by the Israelis. They said they don't have that capability. 2 Israeli soldiers were killed in night operations. And they still said that that Hezbollah doesn't have this capability. Again, there was another inset there you could see flying through the castle. And then Hezbollah is going to taunt the Israelis here because Netanyahu made a big deal about this. He came and spoke before the military said that they had captured the castle. He was real eager to say it, in part because of the humiliation of their defeat in May of 2000 when they left this castle, and Hezbollah immediately moved up and put flags on top of it. Although you can still, in a couple of these shots, you can still see the Israeli flags from their photo op. But the inset gives you an idea of what Israel was trying to show from these thermal, from their photo op that we're seeing thermal here. So this capacity is effectively operates as night vision capability, and we don't know how many the Israelis have here. So Hezbollah says here, we came and looked and couldn't find you, and then they say share this so that the Golani Brigade can see it. Hezbollah said for their part on Monday, they said, given the significant negative impact caused by the video footage broadcast by the Islamic resistance of its operations against the Israeli army on the consciousness of the settlers inside the occupation entity, the Israeli army strove to obtain an image it could promote as a crushing victory, hoping to soothe the fear of the northern settlers. The target was the historic Al-Shakif Castle in southern Lebanon, which is only 4 kilometers from the border, as Hezbollah pointed out. So this did not require some long ground operation. It still took more than a week for the Israelis to get up to the castle. Let's take a look at 32, because you're going to see these movements at night of these soldiers. The Israelis have moved all of their, the majority, almost all of their operations of moving troops. They do it at night because of these drones, and that's what they thought was their advantage, that they wouldn't be targeted at night. But there you see 2 soldiers picked up on thermal camera, and the explosive device is delivered with the precision of a precision-guided missile right into the group of soldiers. One soldier, we're not sure if it was this operation, but 2 soldiers in separate incidents were killed overnight by thermal armed FPVs. Let's look at 32. And also the Namr was penetrated, and that was the Shaked battalion of the Gavadi Brigade. And the Shaked battalion chief was injured in that Namr penetration. 7 soldiers in the back, which is the cabin, were wounded or killed in that operation. There you see another soldier there struck by a thermal armed FPV drone. That is presumably one of the others. Didn't really match up to the field report, but the Israelis are delaying their reportings on some of these, which is consistent. Are we on 33? Okay, this is a Namr troop carrier, and again, so we know that it's difficult to penetrate these, but we now know that 2 of them have been and killed soldiers inside, including senior commanders. 4 officers were wounded in the one strike. And one of the soldiers that was killed, just a note, he's from the Ukraine. He moved to Israel 6 years ago. So he'd been in Israel for 6 years. If you want a definition of a settler colony, many people have more experience as journalists reporting in the country, your correspondent included, that are longer than 6 years. But that is how long that soldier had been in Israel. And his funeral was very sparsely populated, and people in Israel were upset by the look of that. But this has been the Resistance Report for day 972 of the genocide in Gaza, and on day 95 of Hezbollah's defense of South Lebanon.
Thank you so much for that, John. I just this week I felt really bad for poor little Danny Danon at the UN, who was he was complaining bitterly about the FPVs. And, won't anyone think of the poor invading Israeli settler soldiers who are just trying to massocre people in
He
the
had
south?
no self-consciousness at all.
No, that's Israeli
what...
societal, norm. There's no self.
Ahmed mentioned that, Ahmed Al-Najjar.
Yeah,
he said you can't hear them; they just kill you.
Yeah, I know.
Which is actually kind of true. So this was going to be the first show that we were going to bring Danny Danon and Trump's, because Trump's quote about Netanyahu was pretty on point as well. That everybody hates Israel, that he's crazy, he would be in jail without Trump. Well, I'm bringing it now, but I was going to put it in my report, but those are two not credible sources. So.
Right. I mean, and what's the utility, right? Like, we remember and Adam Johnson talked about this a few weeks ago. We remember the kind of constructed feud between Netanyahu and Biden during the first, year of the genocide. Oh, Biden's really mad at Netanyahu now. Like, oh, they really don't like each other. And now they're trotting out the same sort of, fomented rift between Trump and Netanyahu.
Except there's a difference that, we're sort of moving in different directions, but there's a difference in that Hezbollah and Iran have succeeded in really driving a wedge between Israel and the United States, because for real, the continued war in Lebanon interferes with Trump's desperate effort to end the war with Iran. And the connection to what John has shown us is that there's no limit to what, Hezbollah's not going to get tired of doing this. They could presumably go on doing this indefinitely. So, and Israel is deprived, at least, Israel is deprived of its usual response right now, which is to even bigger massacres of civilians.
Yeah.
Of course, Israel is still killing civilians, targeting families, murdering entire families in Lebanon, just as doing in Gaza. But what it really wants to do is level the Dahiyah.
Yeah.
And it just can't do that now. You never know. It might still, but of course, Trump could tell them no more bombs. But just like Joe Biden, he is not doing that yet.
There's always more bombs for Israel. With the Danon thing, it's just like, what do you expect? You're invading another country. You expect them not to fight back against you. And he just has just a sense of entitlement, right? Just, you're supposed to feel sorry for us. That our troops are facing resistance to an invading occupation army.
Yeah.
It's just so telling of that arrogance and entitlement.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what else is new, right? But this is what they do. Because, until this point, and this kind of goes back to Ali, what we were talking about before in your report, up until now, the UN has, for decades and decades and decades, given Israel, not just the benefit of the doubt, but a huge unobstructed platform to spew their lies and to try and elicit some sort of compassion and understanding and, therefore, evade any sort of punishment or accountability under the terms of the United Nations. And so Danny Danon is just doing what he's there to do, which is to spew lies and to try and create some sort of victimhood narrative by an invading genocidal settler military. It's absurd, but it's also very telling, because there has been no accountability or responsibility from
I think Israel should run for a non-permanent seat on the Security Council and see how popular it is.
See how that goes.
Yeah, see
what
how
happened.
that goes.
Yeah,
They've talked about it in the past. They've talked about it in the past, but of course I'm bringing it up because We have all been enjoying the
it's
schadenfreude of Germany being humiliated and not winning a seat for the first time. And its foreign minister, Joseph Wadeful, I'm not sure how to say it, attributing that to Germany's support for Israel.
Yeah.
So, you know,
and the irony of Annalena Baerbock having to read the vote count or the vote rolls or whatever it's called yesterday at the UN was, you know, it was a humiliation ritual in itself. It was great.
But so I think that's what Danny Danon should do. He should put Israel up for a Security Council seat, and let's see how that goes.
It'd be great. I would love that. Okay, let's take a look at the website. There are several fantastic features and in-house reports that we've published in the last week. Ali, why don't you take us through what you've been reading?
Yeah, just a couple of things that I wanted to mention. Well, right there on one of the first features is the piece we talked about earlier that I did, but we've talked about that enough. This piece, how activists kicked Israel bonds out of a Michigan scheme. This one is close to my heart. This is by Carrie Zaremba, who I think is a regular viewer. I often see her name in the chat. So Carrie, if you're with us today, thank you for this article. This came about because I visited Kalamazoo, Michigan for an event in April, and I met great people there, great activists, and they told me, you know, I sort of maybe heard, it was there at the back of my mind, but I learned about the Michigan Divest campaign and how successful it's been, that these activists have organized a statewide campaign that succeeded in getting the state of Michigan Treasury to basically divest from a $10 million Israel bond. And now they're going after another Israel bond that is held by the by another agency in Michigan, the State Parks Endowment Fund. But it's an example of a very successful grassroots organizing campaign. And so we asked Carrie to write about it, well, because people should know, but also because this article, based on the experience of the activists in Michigan, has really good strategies and tips of how to do this in your own state and your own country. So, you know, we want to share what activists are doing and how they're doing it and learn from it. So this, you know, well done. Kudos to the activists, to the Michigan Divest activists in Michigan. And I hope that their experience and what they've learned can help others who are trying to advance similar campaigns.
Yeah, I love it, because what Carrie does is she lays out the different tactics that the campaigners used, you know, going after Israel's failing credit rating, for example, and so making the financial argument that investing in Israeli bonds is actually a detriment to the financial viability of the state. I mean, really incredible. You know, it's not romantic, it's not sexy, you know, campaigning, but because it takes so long sometimes. I mean, these activists have been working for years, and other activists around the country have been working in their own communities.
It takes an effort, but actually they won this pretty quickly. I mean, you know, relatively speaking, compared to some campaigns that go on for years and years, they won this relatively quickly. And the other thing it points out is a sort of a national trend in the United States, where obviously the US federal government is the world's biggest supporter of Israel. It's very hard to change federal government policy, but there is a trend of activists going after state level, because the US is a federal system, of course, state level ties with Israel, and municipal level, because you know, you have cities, counties, states that either investing in Israel bonds or who are setting up direct relationships with Israel or Israeli institutions. And those types of relationships are often easier to change because they're happening at the local level. Those local or state level politicians are more accessible, more reachable for people. So that's kind of a national trend. And there may be a similar things going on in Canada or, in other countries that have a similar type of structure. Really interesting how people are kind of adapting their strategies.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Ali, what are some other stories? I know that our colleague Maureen Claire Murphy, our senior editor, wrote a really fantastic, in-depth analysis of
this article, Trump's Board of Peace is fueling genocide in Gaza. I love this analysis because it really ties together a lot of what we've been talking about over the last few weeks. You'll recall our conversation with Mohammed Shahade, what we talked about with Ma'in Rabbani last week, even some of what we talked about with Ahmed today, how the Board of Peace is really, it's not failing. I've seen articles. There was one in the Washington Post the other day saying, the Board of Peace is failing. And what Maureen argues is it's not failing. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do and intended to do, which is to promote, basically to give cover for Israel to keep killing, starving, and displacing Palestinians while pretending that the real problem is Hamas and its refusal to disarm and surrender. And she mentions how, Nikolai Mladenov, the representative of the so-called Board of Peace, went to the Security Council recently and blamed Hamas for the ongoing hunger, the ongoing misery in Gaza, when Israel is entirely responsible. So Maureen really breaks it down and gives it some context. This is a very, very good, very fine analysis, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Anything else you wanted to specifically highlight?
Well, there's a lot there. I just, we have features from our writers in Gaza always that we want people to read and to share. There are lots of them, and so so take a look and show we've been sharing them over recent weeks, and also putting clips, Nora, of you reading some of them on social media, which is something that's another way to share them. The point, as Ahmed Al-Najjar said, is for us to keep talking about Gaza. So one of the ways we can do that is by amplifying the voices and the writing of people there. So it's a point I always want to make.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's always an honor. And of course, go to a YouTube for past shows, past segments. I also did, last week, we published an interview that I did, a standalone podcast interview with Professor Robin Anderson. So about media complicity, kind of picking up where the Adam Johnson interview, first kicked off. Really incredible analysis of the way that the mainstream corporate establishment media keeps selling this genocide. Of course, she has a new book out, so we talk about that. That's on our YouTube page. There's so much content that we're always trying to highlight. So definitely check out electronicintifada.net and our YouTube for all of that. And Ali, of course, if people want to keep this publication and these platforms going, they can donate at the Donate Now link at the top right of electronicintifada.net, or they can follow the links down below. Who do we have to thank this week?
Well, actually, some people have been donating while we've been live, and we're very grateful to them. I see a few donations came in while we were on air. Thank you, Candace, Kirk, Susan, Kate, and thank you to everyone who has donated over the last week since the last show. Nigel, Gary, Justine, Dimitri, Shamim, Doug, Andrew, Iva, Ernest, and Khaled, just to name some of the amazing people who keep us strong, keep our work going, keep us independent, keep us able to share this this analysis and this reporting with the world. As you know, we love doing this live and having just the buzz and the energy of people who are watching and commenting and sharing their thoughts and talking to each other, making connections with each other. But after the show, we slice it and dice it into segments and put it up on YouTube as different segments on different platforms, on Rumble and on Instagram and on Twitter. And those videos get tens, hundreds of thousands sometimes of people watching them each week, which means that we are really reaching a significant number of people in addition to the people who are watching live. And that's our mission, is to inform as many people as possible. And so the people who are making gifts are not just giving support that enables them to see this show or to listen to it or to read the articles. They are helping to inform the world. So thank you to each and every one of you.
Thank you so much. And of course, thank you to Tamara Nassar, our director and producer, for everything that she does. Thank you to all of our colleagues at the Electronic Intifada. Thanks to Eli Gerzon for social media production, Pierre Loisel for radio production, everyone at the Electronic Intifada, all of our contributors. And on behalf of myself, Asa, Ali, John, and Tamara, thank you all, and we will see you next week.